All right. Welcome to our Monday waiver wire mania. A lot to talk about. I know we went over some of these guys in last night's stream, but let's just get going. There's a lot to go over here. So, Justin Fields may potentially be available in your league, but he also might not be, right? Depending on how deep your league is overall. Uh, a little shaky in the season opener, right? But I do think that overall it's a pretty good stash for now. I mean, we did see the one rushing touchdown, 34 rushing yards, right on top of 70 passing yards, and one interception as well. So definitely good flashes there, right? And this is a 12-man league here, and he is not available, right? And in a 20-man league I play in, he's also not available. So it's going to depend on your own league. And yeah, he wasn't exactly impressive being thrown into that game, but we saw the flashes of a dual threat quarterback, right? And I do think that if you're weak at the quarterback position, if you're like me and Tua's your starter in my 20-man league, then, well, it's potentially worth a look, right? But just keep in mind if Justin Fields is available, he is worth at least possible stash, right? It's all right. Cordell Patterson, right? This was interesting, right? I mean, 65 rushing yards, a touchdown, 7 receptions, 71 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Just under 30 points in half PPR. So in full PPR, let's see what that final stat line looked like at the end of the day. Because, yeah, it was a really big day for that of Cordell Patterson, right? Yeah, 32 points. It's interesting, man. He looked like a hybrid running back / receiver. But I don't know how sold I am on this all around, right? Falcons as a whole do not look very good from the offensive standpoint, right? So I am a little concerned about jumping the gun on Cordell Patterson, but I do think if you have the need, I mean the interesting thing is you can potentially play him at running back or receiver, right? So I think if you have the need, for either one of those positions, then it's worth the stash, right? And if you have the availability on your bench, right? Then yeah, I think it's a potential good move, right? But nonetheless, man, Tony Pollard, right? Who I just spelt as Poulard, but Tony Pollard, got some questions in last night's stream about Tony Pollard, and yeah, a fantastic day, really splitting pretty much even time with that of Ezekiel Elliott, right? 123 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, 7 receptions for 60 yards overall. So, yeah, Zeke is still there, and I don't know how consistently we're going to see this, type of stat line overall. But I think it's definitely worth a stash at the moment to watch this unfold. So I think this is going to be your top waiver priority just because of the mere fact that a lot of people already are chasing this handcuff situation, season after season, similar to the Vikings backfield, right? And yeah, I think that if you have the need at the running back position and you have some depth on your bench, then I do think it's a good waiver wire add, but just tamper your expectations. I'm not sure we're going to see this, 25 to 30 point stat line every single week, but I do think it's a good addition. Bipolar Bear 102, what's going on? Happy to see you in the chat. Hope you're doing well. Any trade suggestions for trading Clyde Edwards-Helaire? It's a good question. I would essentially just look, any running back you can get, right? I mean, we haven't been very impressed whatsoever with what we've seen out of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, a decent stat line last night, 89 rushing yards. Really, those 3 receptions, whether you play half PPR or full PPR, really added to the stat line overall. But week 1, under 10 points. And yeah, I don't know why it's showing me on the season. Well, I'm not sure why it's doing that. But yeah, so obviously not a good stat line last night at all. I don't know why it's showing the combined points there. But anyways, yeah. So 8 points last night, or excuse me, in week 1. And so really in full PPR, closer to 9 to 10 points, right? And then last night, a really bad stat line. Yeah. So I would say any running back that you can get off the block who you feel more confident in, and it's really interesting, right? I mean, the thesis is that Clyde Edwards-Helaire being, on the Chiefs, we would see a lot of fantasy value out of him. And he's got some tough matchups coming up: the Chargers, the Eagles, Buffalo Bills, and the Washington Football Team. That's pretty difficult front seven. So I think it's a good time to trade him. And yeah, if there's any running backs, if you need the depth at the position that you can get off of the trade, then at this point in time, I do think that it's a good value whatsoever, as long as you're replacing him, right? So thanks for the question, man, and welcome to the catch. Hope you are doing well, and let me know if you have any further questions stemming from your trade question or any other general questions as well. Yeah, I don't know why NFL Fantasy website is giving me the totals here. So maybe those first 2 players I went over, their totals weren't necessarily correct. We'll have to check that, but that kind of messes up the first couple minutes of this stream, as apparently I can't spell Fields either. But it's all good. So, nonetheless, it's okay to evaluate some of these guys. Yeah, it did. So we were going off of the entire season stats and not just individual game stats. But that's okay. Still good to take into consideration the entire season stats. But anyways, yeah, so maybe temper your expectations on Cordell Patterson. He did not go off as we thought he did. We were looking at his season stats. So I was offered Darrell Henderson and Mike Davis for CEH and Sterling Shepard. And Sterling Shepard is the next guy I was about to talk about. But, I like the depth at running back that's going to give you, right? I really like Darrell Henderson, although I'd just be wary, right? He did, suffer an injury in last night's game, right? A rib injury. So definitely want to be careful with it. You might want to see how the injury kind of plays out overall. Other than that, I like the trade, but I really like where Sterling Shepard's at right now from a PPR standpoint. So I think if you need the depth at the running back position, right, and if you want to, get rid of CEH, then it's a relatively good trade. But just keep in mind, right, we saw D10D's, leave the game last night, and Sony Michelle come in for relief, which is a kind of a waiver wire topic within itself, right? And then, Mike Davis has not been performing too well thus far in the season, right? So, that's a little concerning as well, right? Around 8 to 10 points in his first 2 weeks, right? And the Atlanta Falcons offense has looked very poor overall, right? And then they're facing the Giants and Washington the next 2 weeks. So I don't really see that getting too much better. Maybe against the Giants, right? But they do actually have a decent front seven out there in New York. But week 5, the other side of New York, that's going to be a great matchup, right, against New York Jets. So I think if you want the depth at the running back position, then it's a good trade. But, you bringing up Sterling Shepard, man, if he is available on your waiver wire, then this is a guy that you want to be targeting. Rendon Dye, what's going on, man? Happy to see you in the chat, man. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good Sunday. Hope you enjoyed some football yesterday, man. Hope you are doing well. Good to see, loyal member of the Catch fam in the chat. What's up? Deontay Johnson went down, and I haven't heard anything about it. I had Jerry Jeudy to now Johnson. Yeah, big blows, man. It's tough out there. Gloomy Sunday, what we named it last night, Gloomy Sunday. And, Deontay Johnson was a big part of that, right? We're going to go over some receivers today that I think can help you out, and we might jump the gun and just dive right into those receivers. So if Sterling Shepard is available, I really like where he's at right now. 20 points in week 1, 13 points in week 2. He's facing Atlanta this coming week. The way that the Saints played in week 4, with all those injuries, they look like a pretty good opponent. And then in week 5, you've got Dallas. So some good matchups coming up for Sterling Shepard. If he's available in your league, then I really like him at this point in time on the waiver wire. Depending on how deep your league is, he may not be available though. So let's see, Rendon Dye. I do have Robert Woods, Jamar Chase, Marvin Jones, and Tyler Boyd. Well, that's good, man. You do have some depth overall. Two guys that I do want to talk about at the receiver position, right? Rondo Moore, man. The guy I left on the bench in my 20-man league, right? Wow. He's really emerging as an elite receiver within the Cardinals receiving core, right? We've got Jacksonville next week. Geez, man, 20 points on the day, possibly more if you play in full PPR. So I like where he's at the moment. He had that one big play, right? The one big touchdown that really added to the stat line. But I do think that this is somebody that you need to have as a top waiver priority, especially if you need depth at the receiver position. I really, really like where he's at within this offense. He's definitely surpassing AJ Green as the wide receiver 3. Somebody that I left on my bench in my 20-man league, and I think he's a great waiver wire addition at the moment. And the other guy that I really like at the receiver position is KJ Osborne on the Vikings, especially in full PPR. Another player that I left on the bench in my 20-man league, right? Really good stat line in week 1 against the Bengals, around 11 to 13 points, depending on you play half or full PPR. Week 2, yesterday, really nice stat line in that same game with Rondo Moore, right? 91 receiving yards and a touchdown. Caught 5 of 6 targets. So Kirk Cousins seems to trust this guy, and he seems to not be a dud after week 1. I know we still have a small sample size through 2 weeks, but nonetheless, man, I like where he's at overall, and I would definitely consider him as a waiver wire addition, especially if you need depth at the receiver position. Bipolar Bear 1 or 2. I don't really need Davis, but would like to get a receiver. He is Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, and Devonta Smith. So looking at the players that you are trying to trade there, I do think it's a good idea. I think personally, I would try to get Darrell Henderson, especially if he's staying healthy, right? And that rib injury is not too serious. I like him over Mike Davis, right? Giving up Sterling Shepard is, it's a good value within itself. So I would try to get a good value at the receiver position. But with that being said, I don't think that Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, or Justin Jefferson are going to make it into that trade, just realistically speaking. But I like where Deebo Samuel is at the moment. But I also like where Devonta Smith is as well, man. I think if you can get either of those guys, I think it's a good place to be. And I'm thinking that Devonta Smith is more likely to be traded. I know he didn't have a good week 2, really locked down by the Niners, but in a couple of these upcoming games, I could see him getting back to what we saw in week 1. But we also like where Deebo Samuel's at this point in time, right? And he's been kind of a hot trade commodity right now, going off of his first 2 weeks. But 6 targets. 8 targets, 6 receptions, and 93 receiving yards in week 2. I liked that stat line. Yeah, he did have a little bit of a scare, a possible injury, right? But he seems to be the number 1 receiver on the Niners at the moment. So I think if you can get Smith or Samuel, as well as Darrell Henderson, you're trading away CEH and Sterling Shepard. I think Samuel and Smith are pretty equal value to that of Sterling Shepard, so I do think that would be a good trade. Rendon Dye, I want more, but who do I drop? It's a tough question, man. You're definitely holding on to that of Robert Woods. The best thing you can do is you don't need to put in a waiver just yet. You probably are going to have to see what happens with Deontay Johnson, because it's possible he's placed on IR, and then depending on his timeline compared to Jerry Jeudy, you're going to keep one of them on IR, and you're probably going to have to drop the other one, right? We should find out today, right, what's going on with Deontay Johnson, right? Yeah, he's being evaluated. Mike Tomlin's not going to tell us a lot of information, right? I mean, hopefully he's okay. That's the best case scenario, that he has a short timeline. And then you're probably holding on to him on your bench, and then Jerry Jeudy on IR. But if you had to drop one of those players, honestly, I mean, it'll probably have to be Tyler Boyd if you're asking me, man. I think that Jamar Chase looks a little bit more consistent at the moment. Tyler Boyd, had a good week 2, but week to week, I think that Jamar Chase and Marvin Jones are going to be more consistent for you. So some tough calls to make there, man. But if you're asking me, that's who I would look for, right? But speaking of Darrell Henderson, right, let's talk about Sony Michelle, who a lot of people are going to go after in the waiver wire as he came in and essentially relief for Darrell Henderson, and he played pretty well, right? Kind of was trying to put the game away for the Rams. 10 rushes, 46 rushing yards overall. So if Darrell Henderson is out for an extended period of time, then yeah, Sony Michelle's a good trade, right? He's an RB1 on the Rams, right? But overall, I'm still rolling with my faith in Darrell Henderson. But if he can't play, then yeah, of course Sony Michelle is a good waiver wire option overall. Okay, so a lot of people are talking about James White at the moment, who's probably rostered. If you play in a deep enough league, 12-man or more, and it's PPR, half PPR, he's probably rostered. But yeah, he's put up a good stat line in week 1, right? And he's put up a good stat line now in week 2 with the addition of a touchdown on top of it. At least 45 receiving yards in week 1 and week 2. So I do like where James White is at, and if he's available, I mean, Mac Jones has shown some pretty good confidence and chemistry with that of James White overall. So, I think he's a good waiver wire addition, especially in full PPR. I think that's where he's the most valuable. So, Henry Ruggs, man, guy who I dropped in my 12-man league, and he came back and mocked me pretty heavily, man. 113 receiving yards yesterday and a touchdown, about 20 points overall. So, had a lot more target share against the Steelers, so we like to see that. But like I said, I dropped him because I wanted to see how this Raiders receiver room kind of played out. And he looked pretty good out there. That really big, 61-yard touchdown definitely helped the stat line. But I think he's worth a look at the moment as the most explosive receiver on the Raiders. But I want to see some more consistency out of Henry Ruggs before I really jump the gun. If you guys didn't add Tim Patrick last week, he now has a touchdown in week 1 and week 2, right? He's facing the Jets in week 3. Couple tough matchups coming up, but nonetheless, man, with Jerry Jeudy going down, I mean, I told you guys last week, go and pick up Tim Patrick, right? This was like the one thing I got right yesterday, and yeah, man, I think Tim Patrick looks really good. I think Teddy Bridgewater trusts him, right? And interesting that he was 3rd in targets overall. That's referring to the year before. Never mind. But I like the way that Tim Patrick looked in week 2, and I think he's a good waiver wire addition if he's still available. He's a solid wide receiver 2 at the moment. Cortland Sutton's definitely a wide receiver 1 in that offense. We know that Noah Fant is there as well. But overall, I like where Tim Patrick is as a wide receiver 2. Brendan Dye. I think I'll try to make it a trade like 2 wide receivers for a better one. Yeah, man, let me know how the trades are looking for you. And let me know if you have any questions about your trade overall and who you're going to potentially try and give away. So a lot of people talking about Michael Carter at the moment, right? Someone who had a lot of buzz in the fantasy community. Really in like July, right? And then in August, it kind of crashed. We didn't really see a lot of people talking about him anymore. But I don't know, man. He got the primary amount of, rushes yesterday. And he got some receiving work as well. I mean, he put up a pretty good stat line, especially in full PPR. But I'm not fully sold on any Jets players overall. I'm not entirely sure that I like Michael Carter as a whole, But I think if you need depth at the running back position, or if you have depth availability on your bench, then it's a good situation to monitor is where I'm at the moment with it. But who knows? I could be wrong. Someone's got to emerge out of that backfield really as a primary back, because right now, Tevin Coleman, Carter, and Ty Johnson are still splitting time, and we'd like to see someone emerge as an RB1, and maybe the Jets do something offensively, right? Ooh, what a rough day they had yesterday. But our guy, JaMycal Hasty, right? This could truly be the RB1 for the San Francisco 49ers, right? Not too great of stat lines in week 1 or week 2, but Raheem Mostert is out for the year, right? Elijah Mitchell hurt his shoulder yesterday, and Trey Sermon played, but only got 1 carry yesterday. So at the moment, I mean, Shanahan might roll with our guy Hasty as the primary running back. So I think he's worth a look. If he's the RB1, I mean, you guys know how hesitant I have been of running backs on the Niners, and at this point in time, I would say he's worth a look, and definitely a waiver wire addition, right? Zac Pascal may have got drafted in your league, may be available, hard to say, right? He's looked really good. 3 touchdowns through, week 2 now. The only hesitation here is Carson Wentz's injury, right? And I don't know how good this Colts offense is going to look. We saw the chemistry between Wentz and Pascal, and now we're going to have Easton in there more than likely in week 3 against the Tennessee Titans. So I don't know, man. It's a tough call to make, but I think if you have room on your bench, he's a good snag for the time being. So, I'm seeing Kristin Kirk pop up a lot on waiver wire additions, but more than likely in deeper leagues, he not even just deeper leagues, but pretty standard leagues overall, like anywhere from 10 to 20 man leagues, right? He probably got drafted, right? He didn't have as good of a game in week 2, but in full PPR, he still put up a good stat line, right? We really saw him go off in week 1, but a really good matchup here in week 3 against Jacksonville. And yeah, man, I like where Kristin Kirk is at, but I think, honestly, Rondo Moore looks like the more consistent player, right? But if Kristin Kirk's still available on the waiver wire in your leagues, then yeah, I think he's definitely worth a look overall. Okay. Derek Carr, man. We talked about this last night. It's time to stop sleeping on Derek Carr, man. If he's available in your league, and he could have very well gotten drafted, right? Man, he looks really good through week 1 and week 2, especially in Superflex leagues, especially if you want depth at the quarterback position, right? Maybe you have Carson Wentz as your starter, right? It's probably unlikely, but maybe you're playing Superflex and Carson Wentz was your QB2, right? In playing Superflex, Derek Carr is probably not available unless it's a smaller league, but nonetheless, man, if Derek Carr is out there on the waiver wire, he needs to be picked up, right? Another QB who's kind of being slept on at the moment is our guy Teddy Two Gloves, right? Teddy Bridgewater has looked pretty good here in week 1 and in week 2. Especially in deeper leagues, super flex leagues, right? He is a player who's got the Jets in week 3 who should be added. Zach Moss got dropped by a lot of leagues after week 1 being a healthy scratch, right? And I like where he's at, man. We saw the 2 rushing touchdowns. He did have a fumble, so it wasn't the best game overall, right? He's got Washington in week 3, a very poor matchup, but only 26 rushing yards and 8 receiving yards, but I know if he didn't have the 2 scores, it'd be a pretty abysmal stat line, but he might be worth a good stash at the moment. And if Devin Singletary is out there on your waiver wire, he looks pretty good as well, right? 82 rushing yards yesterday, touchdown and 9 receiving yards. Pretty similar to what he did in week 1, although he didn't get a touchdown in week 1. But once again, a tough matchup in week 3 against Washington for both of those Bills running backs. But I like where he's at, man. And I think both of those running backs are worth a stash, to say the least, right? So J.D. Mckissick probably in 12-plus man leagues got drafted. but his usage in the red zone was good last Thursday, right? 10 rushes for 83 rushing yards, or excuse me, 10 rushing yards overall and 83 receiving yards overall. So this is what we expected out of J.D. McKissick. He's going to have weeks like he had in week 1. And then he's going to have those big PPR weeks. So just monitor his usage and make sure that he's going up against weaker opponents like the Giants, right? And I think he'll work out overall. So those are really my main guys. I mean, I like where Sammy Watkins is at the moment. But I do think there's better receivers out there. As you see, he's rostered on my team, right? 96 receiving yards in week 1 and 44 receiving yards in week 2. But we like where he's at, man. 7 targets last night. We're hoping to see Rashad Bateman come off the IR soon. But right now, Sammy Watkins looks like a good wide receiver too, and he might be worth the addition, right? Speaking of... well, I guess Darius Slayton's not really a wide receiver 2, more like a wide receiver 3. But Darius Slayton looked pretty good out there in week 2. He did have that drop at the end of the game. I mean, slightly overthrown by Daniel Jones, but nonetheless, the ball touched both hands, right? So I like where Darius Slayton is at, especially in deeper leagues, right? 16-plus leagues, where you're definitely looking at wide receiver number 3s. I think he's in a good position if he is on the waiver wire. Okay, I got an interesting player to talk about that I've been hearing some buzz about in the fantasy community. Okay, well, let's see. There's a lot of players with the last name Williams, but Max Williams on the Arizona Cardinals. Was this a flop of a game? I'm not sure. Week 1, 0 points. Week 2, 94 receiving yards, right? For, somewhere between 12 and 15 points, depending on your scoring matchup. 7 catches. Hard to say. We'll find out more in week 3, but nonetheless, that week 3 opponent at Jacksonville is pretty intriguing. So I think if you need depth at the tight end position, especially in deeper leagues, right, Max Williams is he's a good stash at the moment. We'll leave it at that, but we do want to see a larger sample size overall. All right, so Danny Jones, right? I mean, we've talked about Daniel Jones in our Thursday night football reaction. And yeah, man, if Danny Jones is out there on the waiver wire going up against Atlanta, New Orleans, and Dallas in the coming weeks, it really shocks me to say this, but you should add Daniel Jones. I mean, he's had a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown in week 1 and in week 2. Don't forget in week 2, he had the drop by Darius Slayton at the end of the game, and he had that bogus call where the touchdown was called back, and he should have had almost 40 points in week 2, which is just absolutely crazy against a good Washington football team defense. So I like where Danny Jones is at. Let's look at another guy by the last name Jones. Let's see how Mac Jones is looking on the season, right? Not incredible, right? I mean, look at week 2, man. You beat up on the Jets and you don't score a single touchdown. Only have 186 passing yards. I mean, in deep leagues, deep super flex leagues, maybe still worth the stash if he's out there. But at the moment, I don't know how it's going to look for that at Mac Jones. So I just wanted to bring him up because you guys know that we love our guy Mac and Cheese here at the Catch. So nonetheless, man, let's go over a couple defenses very quickly. I started the Carolina Panthers defense in my 20-man league, and they performed very well, right? 4 sacks, 2 interceptions, and only 7 points allowed. So they've got Houston in week 3, and we don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be after that injury to Tyrod Taylor. So they are looking like a prime defense to stream in week 3. I would definitely consider them at the moment. Chicago Bears defense went crazy yesterday. 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, a fumble recovery, a touchdown, only 17 points allowed, right around 19 points. They've got Cleveland here in week 3. It's not a great matchup, but they 0 points in week 1. So I mean, we want to monitor this situation as they played very well, but I don't know if we're going to jump the gun there quite yet. So man, I will tell you one team that, they're right here as well. The Las Vegas Raiders have got Miami in week 3 facing Jacoby Brissett, right? And I think they have an opportunity to put up some pretty big points in week 3 as well. So I like where they're at as a whole. They've looked good. I mean, they haven't looked amazing in terms of fantasy points, but as a defense, they've actually looked pretty good, and they're helping their squad win some football games. So I like where the Raiders are at as well. And another defense to go over, right, who's looked pretty poor towards the beginning of the season here. I mean, the Titans defense as a whole, man. I mean, 0 points in week 1. 2 points in week 2, man. I get it. But they're going up against who should be Jacob Eason at the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts in week 3. Then they got the Jets. Then they've got Jacksonville. So I could see a nice little streak here for the next 3 weeks for the Tennessee Titans. And they might be worth an addition at the defensive position. So let's go ahead and just go through the list, make sure we didn't miss anyone, as I just took some notes on some guys that were popping up out there, right? Taylor Heineke is a quarterback who, in deeper leagues, right? I mean, this is my top waiver wire in my 20-man league, right? And I think that he is worth an addition in deeper leagues and in super flex leagues. I mean, not a great, I mean, he didn't play the whole game in week 1, right? But in week 2, a pretty good stat line overall against the Giants. A tough matchup, pretty tough matchup here in week 3 against Buffalo. But he will be facing Atlanta and New Orleans the coming week. So I think he's got some decent opportunities there. Two teams that we haven't talked about at all because they haven't played yet will play tonight, right? The Packers and the Lions. If Jared Goff has a good game tonight, although he's facing Baltimore and Chicago and even Minnesota to some degree, some tough matchups in the next coming weeks. If he plays well tonight, then at that point, after that giant week 1 performance, he might be worth a waiver wire addition at the quarterback position in your deeper leagues as well. So let's just go through here, make sure we didn't miss anyone. How did Philip Lindsey play? He had a pretty good game in week 2. Only 2 rushing yards, but 22 receiving yards in that 1 touchdown, and kind of a design play that we saw out there. So he looks okay. Let's check on David Johnson. The thing with these Houston Texans running backs is they have to get in the end zone, and there's 3 of them out there, right? Philip Lindsey, David Johnson, and Mark Ingram. If they don't get in the red zone, then they're just not really worth the play. So it's a big gamble, right? It's really hard to really implement those guys overall. Bryan Edwards is probably still available out there. I guess he's the king of touchdowns being called back. He would have had a nice stat line in week 1 and in week 2 if his touchdowns didn't get called back. So I guess we're staying away from Bryan Edwards at the moment. Jalen Rhaegar, not a good stat line in week 2, although we saw a good stat line in week 1. Dawson Knox at the tight end position, man, up. Pretty decent game, but once again, he's going to be touchdown dependent. On the weeks where we're not seeing him in the end zone, he's really only garnering about 4 to 5 targets a game at the moment. But if he gets in the end zone, it's a pretty decent stat line. So Jack Doyle had a pretty good day overall, right? Brought in 5 of 8 targets, 64 yards. So in terms of PPR, Jack Doyle looked pretty good out there as well, but maybe not a top addition for myself at the moment, right? Demarcus Robinson caught a touchdown last night for the Chiefs, but the inconsistency outside of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce is very, very real overall for the Chiefs. So I don't know if we're ready to jump the gun on any of those players. So we know Gabriel Davis had a nice stat line in week 1, but yeah, he kind of dealt with an ankle injury in week 2, and we didn't see any statistics out of him whatsoever. So Dalton Schultz was someone who I told you guys to monitor pretty closely after his week 1 performance, but week 2 was pretty abysmal, right? 18 receiving yards. I think he only had 2 receptions, if I'm not mistaken. So not what we wanted to see out of our guy, Dalton Schultz, who I almost started in my 12-man league. Gerald Everett, man, a guy who I told you guys to be really hesitant on. A guy who I was bigger on in last week's waiver wires. I actually dropped him. He had more points than Cole Kmet, who I started. I should have just stuck with Mckissick, but we all know yesterday was gloomy, gloomy Sunday, and I did everything wrong, right? But, 3 receiving yards, not even a full point in half PPR. So, full PPR, about a point, right? Told you guys to be really hesitant on him, even though he had the touchdown in week 1. He only had 2 targets, and then in the second half of the game didn't have a single target. So Gerald Everett is still a tight end that we want to monitor. Hunter Henry still looking like the tight end 2, right? Johnny Smith is the top guy there, right? And yeah, I would still be monitoring that of Hunter Henry. I don't think there's too much to read into there at the moment. Farrah Brown, someone who was a hot waiver wire after week 1, had a lot of targets in week 1, right? Wasn't really involved, dealing with some injuries in week 2, but no statistics whatsoever out of Farrah Brown. So not very encouraging. And that's, it comes back to the main point that we want to see a larger sample size out of a lot of these guys, as just, the week 1 performance, really not something we can feed too much into. And, that goes for week 1 and week 2 as well. We want to see larger sample sizes out of these players. And, yeah, not really anyone else that I'm seeing as we're going down the final list here that I think needs to be brought up. Yeah, I mean, I think we basically covered all of the big names. But nonetheless, man, I'll go ahead and show you guys to end the video who I've got, at least in my 12-man league in terms of the waiver wire. These might not be final because I was just kind of trying to give, myself, and here's my awful stat line. I broke 95 points, though. Did better than we were looking. And, yeah, I mean, the good thing is no matter who I started, I was going to lose, and I still have the Lions kicker up against me. So, yeah, no matter what, I was going to lose. Just a flop of a week outside of Christian McCaffrey, Tim Patrick, and Lamar Jackson, man. But hey, it's a long season, man. We'll bounce back. So, yeah. I've got the Carolina Panthers defense in, dropping Sammy Watkins, trying to get some depth outside of the LA Rams at the defensive position. I've got a waiver for Zach Moss over Cole Kmet, adding Henry Ruggs back to this roster, dropping Terrace Marshall Jr., who someone I spent a pretty good draft pick on, who I had a lot of confidence in. He's not looking great. And then adding KJ Osborne for that of Chenault Jr., right? But Terrace Marshall, man, we've seen some good target share, but I mean, maybe he could explode in week 3 against Houston after we drop him. But nonetheless, man, I've got to make some dire moves for this roster, especially with Antonio Brown having such a bad day yesterday. We've got to get some depth at the receiver position, man. So we want Henry Ruggs back on this roster. And yeah, I don't have a waiver for our guy, Rondo Moore, who's definitely a player that we want to add. So we'll go ahead and do that to end the video. I thank you guys who did join the live stream here. Thank you for the fantasy Q&A. I hope things turn around for your guys's season. Those of you who lost Deontay Johnson, those of you who are having some trade questions, shout out to Rendon Dye and Bipolar Bear 102. Appreciate you guys being here in the chat. Paul Anthony, I traded away Sanders to get Saquon. Win or loss? I think that it can definitely be a win, to say the least, man. The thing with Saquon Barkley is we are waiting for his full bounce back from injury, is what I'm trying to say, right? And week 2, he showed that he was starting to bounce back from injury, and I like where he's at this point in the season, right? I think that as we're deleting our defensive depth waiver wire, sorry, trying to put my words together, but yeah, I like where Saquon is at, right? And I do think that he definitely has the potential to turn his season around and come out here and play much better. Now, with that being said, I've liked where Miles Sanders has been at as well. But if you're asking me, I think it's a pretty even par trade. I do think that between the two that they've actually played relatively similar, right? 55 rushing yards for Miles Sanders here in week 2. Still haven't seen him get in the end zone, right? Better receiving work in week 1. He looked a lot better overall in week 1. But Saquon Barkley, yeah, I think he's starting to bounce back from his injury. And I do think that we're going to see some better games. He's got Atlanta, New Orleans, and Dallas coming up. I think the Giants are starting to play better as a whole. So at the end of the day, man, if you have more conviction in the player that you traded for, then I think it's a good trade. I think it's a win. If you feel better about Saquon down the stretch, right? I mean, I do think that as the season progresses, Saquon's going to begin to turn it up. And here towards the end of the season, where, fantasy implications in terms of playoffs start to really matter, your actual playoffs and championships start to begin. So, yeah, I think, down the stretch, it could certainly help you out as well. So, thanks for the question. Thanks for getting on the live stream and joining the chat, man. Appreciate you, giving us a little shout on your respective trade. Hope you're having a good day, man. Hope you had a good Sunday yesterday and a better fantasy afternoon than I did. Hope you consider becoming part of the Catch fam. So with that being said, guys, we are going to sign off. Had to kind of just hop on here and go through the waiver wire mania, as we call it. We were a little bit more excited last week. Waiver wire mania, right? But yeah, this week after that gloomy Sunday, we're really trying to improve our rosters, man. We didn't even go through my 20-team league rosters because I got a lot to think about there. I might not even have a starting quarterback in my 20-man league after Tua got hurt. So, but yeah, guys, I thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. Thank you guys if you watch this retrospectively. Shout out to all the Catch fam. Shout out to all the subscribers, man. Thanks for being on all these live streams throughout the last couple of days. Truly appreciate you guys. And we got a long season, man. We got a lot of time to turn this around. So if you do watch this retrospectively, let me know in the comment section what waiver wires you guys are planning on putting in, what questions you guys have on the waiver wires. And if you did find this enjoyable or helpful, go ahead and smash that like button. And like I said, thank you guys very much for watching and or